Hey guys, I'm the self-described nerd, and oh boy, do I have a video for you today, because in this video, I will be detailing my spoiler thoughts for Scream 7. So I already did my spoiler-free review, that's out on the channel, so in this one, I'm going to be going into all the spoilers about the film, my thoughts on the opening, the kills, and that god-awful ending that completely ruined any enjoyment I had of this movie. So, I'm gonna jump right in. I'm not gonna waste any time because this video is gonna be long. So, like, comment, subscribe. Let's get into it. So, the opening scene, you saw it in the trailer. We all thought it was gonna be the opening in the Stumacher house, and yep, it was. And I gotta say, I really liked the opening. It was really cool to see all this, like the house and all these places from the old movies, and seeing like, oh, this is where Billy Loomis died. Oh, like in the background, there's a plaque for where Liv was shot. Like they're in the kitchen, like, oh, this is where Sydney, roasted Amber, all that. And the girl was like, yeah, that was a horrible way to die. Like, I really like this opening. And, they do the thing that we all expect them to do with like the motion sensor. And obviously they're going to turn that into, a real ghost face, which, random, is this just me? But I noticed like on that scene, like you can see the broken, like the parts of the animatronic on the floor. Like, do we not look at that? Do we not see that this has obviously been, changed? So I thought that was a little bit odd. But, they get killed. The boyfriend guy gets killed. The girlfriend guy, the girlfriend lasts a little bit longer, but, she falls onto the knife and then she gets stabbed a whole bunch. And then, Ghostface, pulls out the fuel and starts burning the house down and like burns her, and she dies by immolation, which is how she said that she didn't want to go out. So I thought that was a nice little callback. And then he walks off, not even looking back, the house is burning. It's cut to the title. Like, that was such an awesome opening. But, it does kind of get ruined by the reveal at the end, and I will touch on that when we get to that. So then we transition into Pine Grove, I think was the town, Pine Forest Grove or something like that, and we get introduced to Tatum and her boyfriend Ben, I think it was. I think it was Ben. He was really a nothing character, so, who knows if his name was Ben? I don't really care to look it up because, he was stupid and that whole character was stupid, but, he sneaks into the window. They were really like redoing the scene where Billy sneaks into the window with and like visits Sydney, and he's talking like, oh, Stab was on TV and it got me thinking of you. And then Sydney comes in, and I thought that actually was really cute with like how Sydney was like on the reverse end, and then she was like, oh yeah, how are you doing, Tatum? Yeah, hi Ben, how you doing? How's it back under the bed there? And he's like, well, hi Mrs. Evans. Like, I thought that scene was pretty good. And then she kicks him out because obviously she doesn't trust him because Billy and all that. Which, let me talk about the two main characters of this movie. You got Sydney and Tatum. Tatum, I didn't love Tatum. I mean, obviously I like Tatum. I don't want to see her succeed because she's, Sydney's daughter. Like, automatically, I'm just like, I'm gonna root for you. You're Sydney's daughter. But she was fine. She didn't do anything that like made me absolutely love her. She was just, the new Sydney. She was the final girl, all that. She's got the. I mean, I feel like we all predicted the relationship with her and her mother, where she's like, "Oh, mom, why won't you tell me about your past?" And Sydney's like, I know I wanted to shield you from that, all that. So, I mean, that was fine. She was fine. But Sydney is where I will give this movie its flowers because Sydney is absolutely great. Sydney Prescott is and always will be my favorite final girl, and this movie, despite how terrible the ending is, does not change my opinion in that regard. Sydney is just as good, if not better, than some of the other Scream movies in this one because she is phenomenal. I mean, Nev always does a great performance from, the innocent in the original, and then trying to move on with her life in two, and then the traumatized victim in number three, and then the more accepting version in four, and then in five, where she's just like over this shit and she just like comes in and just not takes care of it because of Dewey and all that. Like, and then now this time where she toes the line, where she's like, you can still see that what has happened in the past has weighed down on her and still haunts her, but it doesn't cloud her. It does not, she doesn't dwell on it. She doesn't let it control her like she did in Scream 3. Sydney is still badass. She still is capable. And the scenes where she's fighting Ghostface, like, oh my god, that was so cool. And also, I liked Mark. I mean, obviously, I'm disappointed that Kincaid didn't return and they couldn't get Patrick Dempsey back. I think it would have been much better if it was Patrick Dempsey, but I don't know. Joe McHale and, Nev, they didn't share a lot of screen time together, but, it felt like they had really great chemistry, and I really liked them. And it was nice seeing Sydney, be happy and be with someone that she loved. It was really good for her, and I'm glad that she had that. Um, so then this is when we go and we meet the friend group. We've got, what's her face? Hannah, played by McKenna Grace. You've got Celeste O'Connor's character, who's like the innocent, bubbly girl. And then you've got, the dude from Gen V that's playing like the love interest for Celeste O'Connor's character, and he's like the horror nut, and he's the what you call it? He's not like the new Randy. He's not like he's more obsessed with like the true crime, not like the stab movies, but the actual like Woodsboro murders and all that. And then there was, I think that was the main. Oh, I mean boyfriend guy, but boyfriend guy doesn't really matter. Boyfriend guy was awful. I hate boyfriend guy. So then we go to like rehearsals at the school, and we're introduced to who I thought was going to be the killer, which was George Willis, because I thought like Willis, as the killer, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. Maybe that's what they were referencing, where he was the director, and he was kind of like you're not playing this dog very well. Dogs are supposed to be energetic. You're kind of like scared and shy. Like, I would expect more from you of your Sunday's daughter. And I was like, okay, wow, that was kind of uncalled for. But I'll keep my eye on you. But then, this is when we transition the first big attack, where we get, you know, Hannah, McKenna Grace's character. She's in this harness thing, and this other guy, he's controlling the harness, and they're practicing. It's just the two of them, and then the guy controlling, like, he hears something, and then next thing you hear stabbing off screen, and then the harness keeps like swinging McKenna Grace back and forth and smashing her into things, and and then Ghostface appears and like holds out his knife, and like he keeps like slashing her as she goes by. That was a really good kill, and that's another positive I will give this movie is there is a lot of kills, and they are really, really bloody and gruesome. Like, you watch the first couple of Scream movies, and aside from like the occasional like really brutal, like Casey's murder, not K, yeah, Casey's murder in the original was like super gory, but the kills in the original three are not that gruesome. Like, they're very tame, and the kills in this one were super bloody. Like, wow, I was really impressed. That's another thing I'll give this movie its flowers for. So now that Hannah is dead, the cops come. They're like, oh shoot, again, I forgot about something. So before this was happening, Sydney's at her coffee shop, and Sydney's like, doing her thing, and then she gets a call, and it's Ghostface, and he's like, oh, Sydney, nice little town, I was in Woodsboro, all this stuff, and she's like, yeah, yeah, yep, keep talking, you're fine, whatever, because, she's been through this shit already. This has happened all the way back in Scream 2, like, she just records it, and she moves on, and she's like, you're awfully, you're awfully mean or some whatever she says for an asshole hiding behind a voice changer. And he's like, oh, I'm not hiding, Sydney. I'll prove it. And then he calls her, and it's freaking Stu Macher. And it's Matthew Lillard, and he's scarred up, and he's dancing, and he's all happy, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you. I still have a thing for you. I'm gonna go kill your daughter, all that. I'm at her school. And I'm like, oh my god, they are actually freaking doing it. Because, if you don't know, which if you look on my channel, I have a video where I talk about how Stu could return. And in that one, I said that I was someone who thought that he was not dead. I have always said that. I have been championing it from day one. And I'm sitting there in the theater, and I'm like, oh my God, they are actually doing it. It is really him. I was like shaking in my seat. I was so excited. And, we'll talk about that, but this is where I'm going to take a moment to apologize for that video. I've been considering taking it down, but, that's the coward's way out. But, just know I'm never gonna be able to watch that video without cringing. Cause oh boy, did I! Oh, I got that one wrong. Oh God, that was embarrassing. So then okay, not we'll talk about Stu later on, but we get to when is Hannah's dead. All the police come and interviews, like everyone, like where were you? Where were you? And the which called George Willis was like, oh, I was at home. I went home. I got some food and all that. And I was like, okay, I'm still keeping my eye on you, all that. But then we go into the transition into the attack on the house, where they went in, they checked the place, and they were like, "Oh, everything's clear. No, there was no one here." Like, did you not check the attic? Like, that would be the first place I would look, but whatever. But that leads us to this really, really cool scene of the house attack, and there were so many great points, like where Sydney and Mark are just beating the shit out of Ghostface. Like, that was something like I've wanted them to do. Like, just beat him up. He's just a dude. Beat him up. And then you get like going to the crawl space scene, and that scene was really suspenseful and great. And eventually we get out in the lawn. I'm like, okay, so the part where they turn their back for a second, and he gets away and all that, and then I'm like, they should just beat him up, continue beating him up, and then Cindy takes the post and he's like beating Ghostface, and Mark throws him out in the road, and then a car comes out of nowhere and hits Ghostface and runs him over. I'm like, oh my God, there's no way they're actually gonna do this. And then Gail gets out, and the Meeks twins get out, and they're all exchanging like, "Oh, hi, how are you doing, Sydney? Oh my gosh, this is crazy," and stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh my God, they're having them talk, because Ghostface is gonna escape, and they're gonna turn around, and he's gonna magically have disappeared and all that. But no, they go like, let's unmask him, and then they go and they take off. And like, oh my God, they're actually taking off the mask. And then I flash back to scene at the diner, the coffee shop, where some rando got coffee, and what you call it, the camera lingered on them for a second. I was like, huh, I gotta remember that. And then as they were about to take off the mask, like, well, if they're gonna take off the mask, obviously it's gonna be that random guy. And sure enough, it was that random guy. But my mind was like, oh my God, we're doing something different. We just had a killer reveal. What are we gonna do with this? Where are we gonna go from here? And then we transition to like Gail and Cindy are like, we got to do this, we got to take him down. They said that guy was it, but he was just some crazy person who escaped from a mental institution, so let's check there. This is where, before I talk about this, I wanted to talk about how I figured out who the killers were, because the mental institution scene also gave away who one of the killers was for me. So earlier there was the scene where you're meeting all the characters, and you go in the coffee shop, and earlier Tatum and Sydney had this whole argument about how, like, oh, like, you never talk about your past. And Sydney sits down with her friend Jessica, and Sydney's like, hey Jessica, how do you deal with your past? And Jessica's like, well, since I had like this abusive ex-husband, it's kind of really shitty. And I was like, that is such an odd way to deliver exposition. And then I was like, my brain was like, well, that's because they want you to, that's good because it's going to be important later on, isn't it? And I was like, yes, it is, because she is going to be revealed to be one of the Ghostface. I clocked it right there. I was like, that is such an unnatural way to just shove that little bit of dialogue, that little bit of exposition in there that they 100% needed in there, because it's going to come back later on. I was like, I bet $1,000,000 right then and there that she is the killer. And then, we transition into this scene with at the at the psych ward. And up until this point, they got another call from Stu, and they've been talking about, like, there's no way it's actually Stu. It can't be real. It has to be a deep fake. We're gonna send it off. We're gonna double check. So I'm like, okay, there's two ways we're gonna go about this. We're gonna either, like, they're right, and it's not Stu, because that's crazy, or number two, they're telling you that it's crazy so that they can pull the rug out from under you. So right now I'm still like guessing. Like, I don't know if that this is gonna be Stu. And then we transition and we meet with you know Ethan Embry's character Marco, and he's talking, and like they're like, oh, who is this guy? Can we see his room? So they go to his room, and it's the crazy person. Well, that they already unmasked, and then they show him like, hey, you know who this person is? They show him a picture of Stu, and he's like, oh yeah, that's John, John Doe. Yeah, we got him like a little bit after '96. He came here. He's best buddies with the dude that escaped, and he did his time. And then 2 weeks ago, we released him. So yeah, that's who that is. And I was like, okay. So one of two things is about to happen. A, Stu is the killer. Obviously, he's escaped from the psych ward, or he got released from the psych ward. He's coming back to plot his revenge. And if it's not him, then Marco is a killer, because that would mean that he just made up this whole elaborate lie to convince them that Stu is back. So either Stu is back or Marco is a killer. And, that was had, obviously, we'll get to that in a second, but, if you've seen the movie, Marco is revealed to be one of the killers. So that right there, that was how I knew who the second killer was, because I was like, either you're lying or it's Stu. And if you're lying, that means you're the killer, because you have no reason to lie about it. So and then we go into they did that. They're like, well, we can track, where this Stu is from my phone, but we got to get him to call. How do we get him to call? And then we get like an interview scene with Gail interviewing Sydney, and she's like, I'm not going to pull any punches. And she was talking about like, where did you go during, after you wrote your book? Where did you go? And then, you had all this family and all that. Like, where did you go? And I watched this scene. I'm like, this is, weird. And, Gail, why are you being a jerk? And then, Stu calls again and all that. And then while this is happening, we had, the Meeks twins that are like, you know, we're gonna round up Tatum's like, how do we figure this out? Meeks are like, well, we just round everybody up. We, get them together. We have a good old fashioned sit down. We talk about the mode, and we figure it out from there. So they all gather at Celeste O'Connor's, place, the CC, or yeah, I can't remember what it was, but it was some sort of diner pizza thing place, and they're all there. And then Stu calls them like, hey, I'm here with you. I'm gonna go kill the people there. And we start getting, people inside the place start getting attacked. And this whole scene was so brutal, with like Celeste O'Connor's character coming out of there, and her getting attacked. And then there was a scene where Gen V kid is going in there, or Gen's, yeah, it was Gen V, it is Gen V, Temp V, Compound V, all that. What you call it, Gen V, the Gen V character. He goes in there. He's like, I'm gonna go fight the killer, and then he runs in there, and then he comes out, and he's got like blood dripping down. I was like, oh, well, then he's the killer, because that's obviously a fake out death. But then the killer, what you call it, the killer slashes Mindy, and she collapses to the ground, and Chad accidentally gets stabbed, and they're down for the count. Which we'll call it. And then he comes out, he like completely eviscerates, Celeste O'Connor's character, which was crazy. And then, he drags, Gen V kid, and he like finds one of those like, bar tap, thing that you pull where you like the beer and all that. He takes him, lifts him up, and he fucking impales him on it. And then he's like, his eyes are like bloodshot, and then it's like, what you would call it, a like beer coming out. Like that kill was so freaking good. Oh my god! Like the kills are a really redeeming factor. I mean, not enough to redeem this movie fully, but it was, the kills were awesome. And then we have there's also two other things happening. You got Sydney, who's like, sees Stu calling, and she's like, all right, I'm gonna go over there, I'm gonna go stop him. And then Gail's like, Cindy, where are you going? Oh god, I hate it when she does that. And then she freaking disappears from the movie. Like, she does not reappear until the killer has already been like, what was Gail doing during this entire time? Like, Sydney leaves him. Like, you could say like, oh, Sydney was gonna take the car, and didn't have a ride and all that. But Sydney makes it on foot. Like, what was Gail doing during all this? Was she just like, oh, well, I guess, Sydney's got it. I guess I'll just, sit here twiddling my thumbs. She's got this one. So that was so stupid. And then we have what is quite possibly one of the dumbest things. Wait, it's, not the dumbest. The reveal is the dumbest. One of the dumbest fake out red herring things in the entire franchise. So we get, boyfriend guy and Tatum are going in their car, like, can you take me? I want to go to the station to be with my mom, all that. And she goes in and she goes in the car and he has his laptop in the car and it opens and she opens it up and there is the deep fake Stu on his computer screen. Like, it shows like him turning himself into the deep fake, like, I'm gonna gut you like a pig, Sydney. It shows him being like transformed into Stu, and then she's obviously like, oh my god, you're the killer. He was like, no, I was just trying to see if I could do it. Obviously I had to go, like, do, like, not only make it and map it out, but also I had to make myself saying these horrible evil things about Sydney, just, for research. And then obviously, she's like, no, 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 you're definitely the killer, smacks him, runs away. And then we get this awesome scene where, like, Ghostface is walking through the empty streets, and because of curfew, there's no one there. That was really cool. And then boyfriend guy reappears, and I'm like, oh my god. I was still, like, teeter-tottering between, like, is this a red herring? Is he the killer? All that. And then she's like, oh my god, you're okay. Like, wait, last time you saw him, you smacked him in the face with the computer and, like, you're Ghostface, and then you see him again and you're like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, let's be best friends again. Like, did you not think this person was the killer like 2 seconds ago? Like, what are we doing? Who wrote this garbage? And then we get, boyfriend guy dies. R.I.P. boyfriend guy, you were forgettable, no one likes you. You will not be missed. And then, and she goes inside, the coffee shop, and, she thinks she's safe, but then, the ghost face also knows the key, and I was like, huh, hasn't been seen in a while. It's Jessica, who had, like, that one random scene where she and, Gen V kid, who's her son, was, they met Gail, and they were like, you just stay away, and she's like, you leave my son alone, meh, meh, meh. So that was the last time we had seen Jessica, so I was like, huh, they're friends, so we haven't seen her in a while. And since Jessica's Sydney's friend, she would probably know the code. So I wonder who Ghostface could be. But which I it wasn't didn't end up being her in that scene, but I'm sure she told her partner. But then we get the really cool scene where, like, you see in the trailers where she's in the, what you call it, she's in the office and she has to shoot the ghost face through the wall, and um, Sydney's director. I thought that was really cool. And then she's trying to escape, and then she opens the door, and then another ghost face pops out, and there's two of them. My theater was like, oh my god, there's two of them, and I was like, yeah, I kind of figured there'd be two of them. I didn't really think that was a huge reveal, but apparently my theater was like, oh my god, this is the crazy reveal ever. And then they charge her, and then it fades to black, and then they get the call, like, Sydney, come to your come to the place where your heart is, and all that. So then obviously, go home. Home is where the heart is. So she goes home. She walks into her house, and she's got there's all these, like, computers and tablets set up, and Stu is on there. He's talking to her. He's taunting her, and then I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. Please, please, please. I was still in between, like, I was leaning more towards that it's not going to be Stu. It's, AI and all that. But, then part of me was like, oh my god, it's still Stu. It's got to be Stu. Please be Stu. And then, he crushes my soul, and he's like, yeah, no, it's actually not me. That would be crazy. And then it transitions to Laurie Metcalf as, Mrs. Loomis, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're horrible, Sydney. You ruined my life. You ruined my Billy's life. You ruined everyone's life." And I was like, "Okay, this is kind of cool. I kind of like this. It's a little weird that they're like, the modern day age, and they were not this old when Laurie Metcalf does not look like she is actually aged, fairly well. I saw her recently in that, what was it? What's the crazy Ed Gein show? She was in that. She's aged pretty well, I will say. Good on her. And then transitions to Roman, and he's also looking older. He's like, we're family, Sydney. Let's make a movie together, all this fun stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm no longer liking this. This is weird. And then transitions to Dewey. He's like, we were friends, and I died for you. And I'm like, okay, this is just so weird. Like, oh my god. On paper, it kind of sounded cool, but with them being like, they all obviously since the killers were AI, like it's not Stu, it wasn't any of them, like it was AI. So they're acting like, not like themselves. It's still like something a little bit off because it is AI, but you've got these actors and they're really like Scott Foley's a great actor, David Arquette's a great actor, Laurie Metcalf is an Oscar-winning actress. Like they're all great, but it was just so weird. Like they were acting like they were computer generated. They're also their modern day age and not like the classic age. So it was just so weird. I kind of liked it, but I'm teeter-tottering about seeing it. And then we get out onto the lawn, and Tatum is tied up, and he's got the ghost face behind him, and then he pulls, and obviously at this point they revealed Stu was not the killer. So then I was like, well, then it's Marco because he lied, and obviously Stu's not alive. And sure enough, takes off the mask, and of course it's Marco. And I don't think I heard a single, like when they revealed all Detective Bailey and all the family in Scream 6, like even though it was pretty obvious through process of elimination, like people were still gasping. Like in my theater, like no one was like, oh my god, it's so crazy, the twist. And then I was like, and everyone was just kind of like, huh? Because Marco was in one scene before being revealed as Ghostface. Literally one scene. You saw him for this 30-40 second scene. 40, yeah, and then he disappeared completely from the movie. And then he's revealed to be one of the killers. I was like losing my mind. Like, this is no way. This is actually real. And then, the second that he's like, Stu, coming out, I'm like, oh, like for a second I was like, maybe. And then obviously the other Ghostface, I'm like, okay, there's no way. And they pull off the mask, and of course, who else could it be? It's freaking Jessica, obviously. I literally was like, you gotta be kidding me. Of course it was her. And obviously they start launching in their monologue, and they pull out what they believe to be what's her face Mark's dead body, which that whole like attack scene was another great scene in that movie with Mark and his attack. Like I thought it was kind of dumb how he just like wandered into the unfinished part of the house, like, I'm just gonna go in here, this place where I can't fully see. Like I felt like that was pretty stupid. And I thought that whole like attack with him getting brutalized, like I thought he was dead. So they pull him out and they reveal like he's not dead. And then and then Jessica starts monologuing, and this is where I just sank into my seat. So her motive is that she was in an abusive relationship with her horrible ex-husband, and then she read Sydney's book, Out of Darkness, from Scream 4, and that inspired her to kill her abusive ex-husband. And then she was like, it's like, oh my gosh, Sydney, you saved my life. And then after Scream 4, she kind of like had went to be her own like private life. And then that just like Sydney went away from the public eye. And then Jessica just like, oh well, I guess I'm gonna go insane now. And she went like nuts because Sydney decided to live a private life. Like the motive of this Scream movie is that Sydney, a person that she's never met and just read the book, decided to retire. Ghostface, it kills all these people because Sydney Prescott retired. And then and how like Marco is involved is just even stupider. Where she's like, after you disappeared, I went, crazy. I checked myself into the psych ward where, I met Marco. And we never get an explanation for why Marco is crazy. We never get an explanation for why he wants to kill Sydney. I mean, I guess he's in love with Jessica, and he wants to, you know, be make her happy, but she was being a jerk to him. She was like, no, I'm monologuing right now. You shush, quiet, quiet. I'm monologuing right now. And I was just like, this, why in the world? Like, she's not a good to you. Like, I could maybe see, like, he's trying to please her and go along with her, but she's a jerk to him. Like, what in the world? And then this is where he's like, oh yeah, well, I worked for Google, and this is how I knew all the AI stuff, and this is why we made Stu and all them. So at this point, I was like, come on, just reveal that she's Leslie Mocker. Everyone, literally the person behind me in the theater when there was the scene with like she talked about like oh yeah, I have that abusive husband to Sydney, like which called the lady behind me. She was like, yeah, that's Leslie Mocker right there. So I was just waiting and waiting for them to reveal that she was Leslie Mocker. So then they go through that. They're like, all right, well, I'm going to kill Tatum. Look at this. I'm going to kill Sydney in front of you. And then, you seeing that will, like, you're the new Sydney. And then the cycle repeats. And then, but because Mark, who was like brutalized, like he had a knife in his boot or something or other or something, and then he like uses it to like free Tatum, and then Tatum like headbutts, and then Cindy has an extra gun, so she shoots Marco. He's just dead. He never comes back. He was in one scene, got revealed, got told to shut up, got shot in the face. Charlie, I'm so sorry. Charlie Walker, I always clowned on. I was like, oh my god, this is so stupid. But Charlie looks like Stu Macher compared to Marco. Marco is awful. I would say Jason from Scream 6's opening scene was a better Ghostface than Marco. He is, I mean, Greg, I could see maybe the argument, but I don't count Greg, who was, Jason's partner. Marco is the worst Ghostface we've ever had, and I do not think we will ever top that. The random guy that you met in one scene who had like 2 spoken words of dialogue after he got revealed and got shot in the head, like, oh my god, what a terrible reveal. And then not Leslie, Jessica goes off and she's like wandering through the house, like the unfinished part of the house, and Sydney goes to try and face off against her, and then they fight and they stab her, and then it looks like she's gonna get the upper hand, and then Tatum comes out and shoots her in the head, and then her body disappears, and I'm like, I mean, did she not shoot her in the head? Like, how is she still alive? And then she pops up for one final scare, and then they just unload on her. This whole time I'm watching, I'm waiting for them to reveal that she is Leslie Mocker, because I feel like we all expected it, we all knew. I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And in my mind, my brain was like frantically trying to rationalize, like, there's no way this is the actual reveal. Like, there's got to be some sort of secret reveal. There's got to be another kill. Like, I was thinking, like, you know, I was, desperate. Don't blame me too much, but I was actually thinking like maybe the reason why Gail has been missing is because she's gonna be revealed to be one of the killers, and that's gonna be this crazy twist, and that's why this twist was so terrible. So then we have this crazy reveal that Gail was the killer, but they shoot Jessica dead. They never reveal that she was Leslie Mocker, and then they Sid and Tatum kiss and make up. Mark goes to the hospital. Gail and Sydney are like friends again. Chad and Mindy get to do their news report, and the movie just ends. And I'm like, wait, that was the actual end. That was the actual reveal. That was the actual motives. I kept waiting. I was like, they intentionally made this so bad. Like, I gaslit myself. I was like, they intentionally made this so bad because they're gonna have some sort of crazy reveal about it. But nope, that was the actual ending. And it kind of ruins it because of this whole nostalgia angle, which is what they tried to do meta commentary on. But they never reveal why in God's name they care so much about Stu. Like, I felt like the obvious thing was that she was Leslie Mocker, and all this, but we never get that reveal. So why did they burn down Stu Mocker's house? Why did they deep fake Stu? Why did they deep fake all these ghost faces when they have no connection to Stu whatsoever? I mean, they threw in a line like, maybe the thing in Woodsboro was a diversion, like maybe they did the thing with the Stu house as a diversion, but other than that, what was the point of deep faking Stu? You have no personal connection to Stu whatsoever. All of that was just so the stupid people like me, I'm stupid, who think that Stu is alive, because he's not, he's dead. I admit it. I'm sorry. I messed up. That's on me. But all the stupid people that you know think that Stu is alive are going to be stupid enough to buy a ticket to see this movie on the off chance that it is him. So I just feel like the biggest dumbass in the world right now, because I actually thought that Stu was alive, and I apologize, and I was wrong. So yeah, that's Scream 7. 90% of the movie, I was loving it. And then the reveal was abysmal, and it made it easily the worst Scream movie, in my opinion. I do not think there are so many redeeming factors, and 3 and 4 are often cited as the worst, and the reveal in 3 is really bad, but there are parts of 3 that I like a whole lot more than 7, and then 4, I don't like the look of it, I don't like the motive, Jill's motive, but I rewatched it in preparation for 7, and I really, really have to give them props for the Jill reveal. Like, the Jill reveal is so good. And this movie is just at the bottom. This movie, I feel like, might be our first bad Scream movie. That reveal absolutely ruined it. I have never seen a movie go downhill in such quick time. It was awful. I'm at a loss of words. I'm just so sad. Like, this is what we have become with this franchise. Like, the most lazy, haphazard. They just slapped a bunch of words on the page. Like, it felt like ChatGPT wrote that reveal. It was awful, and it just makes me so sad as a Scream fan, because this is the level of effort we're putting in these films. They are generic, they are soulless, and it is just, ugh. Nev, I'm so sorry. You deserve so much better. So, yeah, that's my spoiler thoughts. As you could tell, I was not very fond of this movie. Maybe on rewatch, I'll gain a newfound appreciation, but that ending was just atrocious. And I'm sorry. I'm just so disappointed. And I'm sorry, Scream 3 and Scream 4. I owe you an apology because you are no longer the worst Scream films. So yeah, there you go. That was, over 35 minutes of me rambling. So that's fun. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you, and I will let you go do whatever you have to do. Just make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you, hey, did you not like this movie? I didn't like this movie. Did you not like this movie? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this movie, let me know. Like, 90% of this movie I like, but that 10% that is just so bad, it overshadows that good 90%. So let me know down in the comments. But I've been the self-described nerd, and I guess I'll be right back.